Rain fell endlessly from the dark sky, soaking through Elara's thin coat as she stood motionless in front of the towering gates. The mansion behind them stretched wide and cold, its glowing windows offering no warmth, only distance. In her trembling hand was a small, worn photograph of her mother, the only thing she had left. Her life had collapsed quietly. Hospital bills she couldn't pay. A funeral she could barely afford. And silence, where love used to be. The only thing her mother left her, besides debt, was a strange gold locket and one warning she never understood. Never take it off. Elara didn't know why. But tonight, it felt heavier than ever. The gates creaked open on their own, as if the house had already decided her fate. Elara hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward. Each step felt like she was walking deeper into something she couldn't explain. Something bigger than her. Inside, everything was silent. Too silent. And at the center of it stood a man who seemed like he belonged to that silence. Julian Vance. His presence filled the room without effort. Tall, composed, unreadable. His eyes didn't welcome her. They measured her. To him, she wasn't a person. She was a risk. He didn't ask about her journey. He didn't offer comfort. He only spoke rules. Rules that sounded less like instructions, and more like boundaries she was never meant to cross. Elara listened quietly, her voice calm when she responded. But inside, something unsettled her. Not fear. Something else. Something familiar. The next morning, Elara met the child she was meant to care for. Lilia. Small. Quiet. Distant. The room felt heavy around her, like it had forgotten what happiness sounded like. Toys sat untouched. Curtains barely moved. And Lilia didn't even look up when Elara entered. She had already decided. People didn't stay. But Elara didn't try to force anything. She didn't demand attention. She simply sat beside her. And waited. Minutes passed. Then more. Until finally, Lilia spoke. Just one sentence. But in that house, it was everything. From the hallway, Julian watched. He didn't interrupt. He didn't react. But something in his gaze lingered longer than it should have. Because for the first time in months, the silence in that house had been broken. Weeks passed quietly, until the moment everything changed. In the mansion's grand library, Elara reached for a book, and it slipped from her fingers. It hit the ground with a dull sound. And from inside it, something small rolled out. A locket. Old. Gold. Intricate. She picked it up without thinking. Then froze. Because she had seen it before. Her breath caught as her fingers moved to her neck, pulling out her own. She placed them side by side. Identical. Same design. Same phoenix engraving. That wasn't coincidence. That was impossible. Julian saw it. And something inside him shifted instantly. His calm cracked. His eyes locked onto the symbol with a tension he couldn't hide. Because that crest wasn't just decoration. It belonged to a name buried in history. The Sterling family. 20 years ago, that family had vanished in a fire so devastating, it erased everything. Wealth, power, identity. No survivors. No heirs. At least, that's what the world believed. The next day, the tension deepened. A black car pulled up. And from it stepped a woman who had spent years chasing power. Lady Beatrice. Elegant. Controlled. Dangerous. The moment her eyes fell on Elara's neck, everything changed. That wasn't curiosity. That was recognition. And behind it, fear. Because that locket wasn't just jewelry. It was proof. Proof that everything she had been chasing might already belong to someone else. That night, Elara couldn't sleep. Her mother's words echoed louder than ever. Never take it off. But now, it didn't feel like protection. It felt like a key to something hidden, something dangerous, something that was finally starting to find her. Across the mansion, Lady Beatrice stood still, staring at her own reflection. But she wasn't seeing herself. She was seeing the past. Because that locket wasn't unfamiliar. It was unforgettable. She had seen it years ago, not as an outsider, but as someone close enough to watch everything. And never have it. The Sterling estate had once been alive with power. And Beatrice had been there. Not as an heir. Not as family that mattered. But as the daughter of a branch that stood just outside the center. A cousin. Close enough to belong. But never enough to inherit. She remembered the way people spoke around them. The way doors opened without question. The way decisions were made in their name. And she remembered something else too. The quiet, growing tension in her own home. Conversations that stopped when she entered. Whispers about legacy, wealth, and missed opportunities. Her parents had never hidden their disappointment. Not in words, but in tone, in silence, in the way they spoke about the Sterlings when they thought no one was listening. They didn't just admire that family. They resented them. And then, the fire. Sudden, violent, final. It ended everything too cleanly, too completely. No survivors. No rightful heir. Just ashes. And opportunity. At the time, Beatrice didn't question it. She accepted what the world accepted. But now, standing in that quiet room, seeing that locket again, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not fear, recognition, and something far more dangerous. Doubt. Because if that girl was wearing that locket, then the fire hadn't erased everything. Which meant, something had gone wrong. Julian didn't rely on memories. He relied on patterns. And Elara didn't fit hers. From the moment she walked in, something had been off. Not suspicious, but inconsistent. The way she carried herself. The way she responded under pressure. Even the way she spoke. It didn't match someone who had lived the life she described. And then there was the locket. Julian wasn't part of the Sterling family. But his family had worked alongside them. Business. Legacy networks. The kind of connections that didn't disappear overnight. He knew enough to understand one thing. That symbol didn't reappear by accident, so while Beatrice moved to control the situation, Julian moved to understand it. Quietly. Separately. Without interference. Beatrice didn't raise alarms. She didn't confront Elara directly again. Instead, she began removing possibilities. Background checks. Old records. Anything that could disprove the girl's connection. Because if Elara was lying, Beatrice would expose her. And if she wasn't, she needed time. Time to decide what to do next. Elara tried to hold on to normalcy. She stayed with Lilia. She smiled when she could. But the feeling didn't leave. That quiet pressure. Like something unseen had shifted around her. Like the world had started noticing her. Before she understood why. Julian watched her differently now. Not as an employee. Not even as a question. But as something unresolved. Because every answer he found only led to more questions. The truth didn't reveal itself all at once. It came in fragments. A record that shouldn't exist. A date that didn't align. A gap where something had been removed. And slowly, a possibility formed. Not confirmed, but undeniable. The gala approached. A night meant to celebrate power. But beneath the surface, it had become something else. A moment where truth would either be revealed or buried again. The gala was in full motion, filled with elegance, music, and quiet power. But beneath all the luxury, tension was building in ways most people could not understand. Elara stood near the edge of the room, still trying to process why everyone seemed to be watching her differently tonight. It wasn't curiosity anymore. It was recognition mixed with doubt. Lady Beatrice was the first to make her move. She didn't accuse Elara directly. Instead, she addressed the room with calm confidence. carefully shaping her words. She spoke about legacy, about the Sterling name, about how dangerous it was for outsiders to carry symbols they did not understand. The implication was clear. Elara didn't belong. The room shifted immediately. Whispering began again. Doubt spread faster than certainty. Elara felt it rise around her like pressure closing in. She didn't speak. She didn't know what to say. She only tightened her grip on the locket under her dress. Then Julian stepped forward. He didn't interrupt Beatrice loudly. He simply waited until the room quieted again, then spoke in a calm, controlled voice. Everything about him was steady, deliberate, and undeniable. He began laying out facts. Not opinions. Not theories. Records. Timelines. Hidden documents that had been cross-verified quietly over the past days. The Sterling family had not simply vanished. There were inconsistencies in the official fire report. Financial movements that suggested preparation before the tragedy. And most importantly, a missing heir had never officially been accounted for. The room slowly went silent as he spoke. Beatrice's expression tightened for the first time, but she still held her composure. She tried to dismiss what he was saying, but Julian continued calmly. Then he turned toward Elara. He confirmed it clearly. Elara was connected to the Sterling bloodline. Not as an imposter. Not as a coincidence. But as the remaining legitimate heir that had been erased from official history. A wave of shock moved through the crowd. Elara didn't react immediately. It felt too distant to believe. Her entire life had been built on being nobody. And now she was being told she was someone else entirely. Beatrice finally lost her calm. Her voice broke slightly as she challenged the claim, but it was no longer confident. There was something deeper in her reaction now. Fear mixed with desperation. And that was when Julian revealed the final truth. Beatrice's family line had been closer to the Sterlings than anyone realized. Her father had been part of the extended branch of the family that managed internal wealth distribution. He had access, influence, and motive. The fire that destroyed the Sterling estate had never been fully investigated beyond surface reports. But financial records, hidden transfers, and timing patterns now suggested something deliberate. A planned removal of the direct heir line to allow the extended branch to absorb control. Beatrice didn't deny it. She couldn't. Because silence was already an answer. For the first time, her confidence cracked completely. The room was no longer unsure. The pieces had aligned too clearly now. What they were seeing wasn't a misunderstanding. It was history correcting itself in real time. Elara stood in the center of it all, still processing everything. She didn't feel powerful. She didn't feel victorious. She just felt exposed to a truth she had never asked for. But then something shifted inside her. Not anger. Not confusion. Clarity. She realized she had spent her entire life surviving without knowing who she was. And yet she had still survived. That meant she wasn't weak. She never had been. She looked at Beatrice, not with hatred, but with understanding. A family had tried to erase another family. And in doing so, they had only delayed the truth. Julian closed the documents in his hand. The matter wasn't about wealth anymore. It was about restoration. And justice would no longer be delayed. The gala ended in silence rather than celebration. Power had not been displayed that night. It had been exposed. Later, as the crowd dispersed and the mansion grew quiet again, Elara stood alone for a moment. Nothing about her surroundings had changed. But everything within her had. She was no longer just the girl who arrived in the rain. And she was no longer someone who could be erased. Julian observed her from a distance but didn't approach. For the first time, he didn't need to analyze her. The truth had already done that for him. Beatrice left the mansion that night without another word. Not defeated loudly, but silently aware that the world she had tried to control was no longer hers to shape. And for Elara, the life she had known was over. But the life ahead of her was finally beginning. Not because she was given a new identity, but because the truth had finally stopped hiding from her.